As I fast approach my 70th birthday in December of this year, and I've had some time off my duties as music director of the New Haven Symphony Orchestra whilst they search for my successor, I've been reflecting on my life in music and its important influences, and realise what a full, privileged and fortunate existence I've led. This wonderful, dark, rich sounding instrument was the love of my life for many years, from childhood to my early professional career as a musician. As a young student of around 11, my Saturday mornings were spent commuting to Ealing Broadway, which is a suburb of London, where I had lessons with the wonderful and great Ambrose Gauntlet. These mornings were filled with a mixture of excitement and foreboding, had I done enough practice, because he was a real taskmaster, but also kind and encouraging. As a cellist, Gauntlet was the principal cello in the BBC Symphony Orchestra when it was founded in the 1930s under Sir Adrian Boult, and then later became the preeminent viola da gamba player in the UK, and combined that with teaching at the Royal Academy and privately. The air in his studio was filled with smoke because he was an habitual chain smoker. And when he demonstrated during lessons, the cigarette would hang out of the corner of his mouth, with the ash cascading down the front of the cello, disappearing through the F-holes. I always wondered if this living ashtray enhanced the sound of the instrument. At age 16, I travelled to the US as a young student to have lessons with Maurice Eisenberg and his assistant, first of all at the Langeais School and then the New England Conservatory. These lessons, sadly, almost put me off the cello, and I was extremely disillusioned and very frustrated. So I returned to London after 3 years to enter the Guildhall School of Music under the inspired tutelage of William Pleath, who was Jacqueline Dupre's teacher, of course. Pleath became my mentor. His musicality and his charismatic personality were inspirational. The lessons were the highlight of every week. You came out of lessons feeling that you could do and play anything. Whilst you were playing in his lessons, he would pace around the room or lean up against the piano, and occasionally grabbing my cello to demonstrate something. And he usually did this while standing up with the pegs of the cello behind his neck, and somehow managed to demonstrate perfectly in tune with a great sound in this upright position. I was always fascinated how he did this, and tried to do it at home but couldn't, and decided that you actually needed a certain type of neck to be able to achieve this stunt. This extraordinary man continues to be my role model today. I can hear his words echoing in my memory, both as a performing musician and as a teacher. He was always positive and encouraging, but everything that he did was at the service of music. While studying with Pleath, I found it necessary to get some help with technical weaknesses and certain mannerisms that had crept into my playing. So turned to the wonderful Anita Lasker-Wellfisch, who was a member of the English Chamber Orchestra and a survivor of the Women's Orchestra in Auschwitz. Anita had been recommended by another Pleath pupil, and I found her to be extremely caring but very direct, and she could identify problems immediately and would design exercises to deal with them. After these lessons, her son Raphael, who of course is one of the world's great cellists today, he and I would spend many happy hours listening to recordings of Casals, Feuermann, Piatigorsky, all of the great cellists, and discussing our preferences in different repertoire. During the summer of 1970, I won a scholarship to study with Miloš Sadlo at the Janacek Festival in Luhačovice in Czechoslovakia. Now, this was only a couple of years after the Warsaw Pact invasion and the dismissal of their charismatic liberal leader, Dubček. The Czechs are extraordinary people, and of course they did the Velvet Revolution in the late 80s, which led to their democratization and freedom from Russia. But I can remember the locals telling me about the Warsaw Pact invasion, where they would change the name of their towns to Dubček, thus confusing the armies, so navigational was near impossible. And of course this was before the days of GPS. It was the first time that I'd travelled behind the Iron Curtain and was doing so alone. There were no other students from the UK, America, or any other English-speaking country. The flight from London to Prague was uneventful, but the train journey from Prague to Brno was full of drunken soldiers. And of course I couldn't understand a word of what they were saying. And I was relieved to get off the train in Brno and catch the local train to Luhačovice, which was an old steam train with wooden seats, and gently made its way to Luhačovice through beautiful countryside. This summer course consisted of masterclasses and chamber music, and Sadlo would hold masterclasses with, I think there were 5 or 6 of us, on a daily basis, rotating the player. My chosen repertoire was Janacek's Pohádka and Martinus's Rossini variations. And I remember Sadlo being extremely reserved and quiet whilst in the studio. But when he was outside in the fresh air, in the countryside, and you were walking with him, he would open up about the situation. And I realized, of course, that he didn't want to talk about anything inside the studio because of the potential of bugging devices. And he made it very clear that the country was demoralized because of the demise of Dubček. I became very attached to the Czech people and vowed to return one day and continue my studies when I'd finished my course at the Guildhall School of Music. So in 1971-72, I won a British Council scholarship to spend a year in Prague at the Academy of the Arts, studying with Miloš Sadlo, Stanislav Apolin, and Sasha Vektomov. What an incredible trio of cellists. Sadlo was the respected old master, Apolin, a card-carrying communist whom the others were extremely wary of, but a supreme technical wizard on the cello. But he lacked any kind of warmth, any humanity. And then the brilliant young Sasha Vektomov, who I remember giving an extraordinary performance of Martinus's Second Cello Concerto with the Czech Philharmonic in the House of Artists. The tension of living in Prague was palpable. Food shortages, low morale, but probably worst of all, any lack of hope in their future. After all these experiences, I was not sure that my long-term future lay in being a cellist, but I returned to the UK and freelanced with the Halle, BBC, Welsh National Opera, Royal Philharmonic, London Sinfonietta, and various other UK ensembles. But perhaps the greatest influence in my life has been, and still is today, my wife Janet. To watch and listen to her teach is my most profound inspiration. Her love of the violin, its music, and her relationship with her students is a lesson in humanity and how music touches each one of us.